Everyone, welcome back to the Search Bar, the podcast for law firm leaders who want smarter growth without the guesswork. Wine optional, insights guaranteed. On each episode, we cut through the noise to show you what actually works: sharper marketing, stronger systems, and strategies designed to grow with you. I'm Eric Ritter, your host and founder of Digital Neighbor and the SEO Sommelier. For more than 12 years, I've helped law firms scale from the inside out, turning online visibility into bigger cases and better clients. So if you're running a law firm and want more of the right leads, larger retainers, and more cases closed, you're in the right place. And if you want to put these leads into motion, check out my Motion for Marketing system. It starts with a free discovery session, no fluff, just a clear path forward. You'll find the link in the show notes if you're interested. Today, I have a very special episode for everyone. We're stepping into a world that deeply affects law firms: real estate valuation and advisory. From commercial litigation to tax appraisals and bankruptcy cases, real estate plays a critical role in the legal system. But valuation is changing fast, influenced by technology, regulation, and of course, shifting market dynamics. Joining me today is Michael J. Lester, MAI, Managing Director of Willowbrook Valuation Advisory Services. With more than 30 years of appraisal and consulting experience, Michael has provided expert testimony, litigation support, and valuation services for everything from shopping centers to Four Seasons hotels to major developments in Washington, D.C. He's also studied the impact of new technologies like AI, AVMs, and blockchain on valuation. I'm super excited to have him here today. Michael, welcome to the Search Bar podcast.
Eric, thanks for having me. I'm looking forward to it.
So we said wine is optional in the intro, but I think we really want to get into that because that's my favorite part of each episode. And usually I talk about the recommendation, but it seems like you brought a great recommendation to pair with today's episode.
Well, so I should say that I am certainly not a professional, but I do work part-time at a local winery here in Maryland, Boydie Vineyards. They've been around for about 80 years. So I think they're celebrating their 80th anniversary this year.
Wow.
So I do a plug to them. If you want to come up sometime, pouring 2 Saturdays a month, the foreseeable future. And one that I think I recommend there and pretty much anywhere in the Mid-Atlantic where we operate a commercial real estate business is a V&A. It's particularly well known in Maryland and Virginia. Probably one of the strongest white grapes, and it'll blend well with other white grapes.
Oh, that sounds fantastic. I'm going to have to make the trek up there to Baltimore, check out the vineyard, and I'll have to make sure it's one of the Saturdays you're pouring.
Come on up.
Love it. Well, Michael, are you ready to get into real estate valuation? That's your bread and butter, right?
Let's do it.
Awesome. So I want to let's start with the big picture. I think that's a good place to start. You've been in valuation for over 3 decades. So I'm just going to ask you point blank, what's changed the most about real estate appraisal in recent years?
I think for some of your viewers, probably the biggest change has been demographics. Many have someone that's been a reliable go-to in the industry. You may be able to tell from some white and gray hairs on me that I'm not at the beginning of my career, but I would tend to be at the younger end of the spectrum. So I would encourage some of your followers to make sure that if they have that go-to, that person has either prepared for a transition or has made sure that they're still in business.
And yeah, so it's a shifting landscape there.
Yeah, and I apologize if my internet connection's a little wonky.
I think we're okay. We're recording locally, so I think we're good. No worries. We'll roll with it.
Okay.
But you just brought up technology, so I think that's a great follow-up question. Is Michael, how has technology reshaped maybe your industry? We see it everywhere.
So I focus on commercial real estate, and that's pretty much anything that has an income stream. What I find in conversation with people when I meet them, particularly up at the vineyard, is they say, "Oh, you're an appraiser. I live in Worthington Valley. What do you think my house is worth?" And I think in the past I might say, "Well, I don't really work on residential real estate because that's more about heartstrings than about a return on investment." But lately, my answer's changed. I think I would say Zillow's not bad. Honestly,
okay.
Particularly if you're in a neighborhood where there have been some recent transactions, a lot of data points, it's probably not super accurate for anything that hasn't sold in a long time. But if you look at trends and how the local real estate market has changed over the last couple of years, it's probably not bad.
Wow. I like your hot take, Michael. A lot of times I hear people that don't like Zillow or say don't use Zillow. So I'm all for, I'm a big Zillow fan myself. So I'm glad to meet someone else who's on board and like enjoys using Zillow and kind of, looking at all because it has so much great data in there too. It's not just the valuation, it's based on so many different factors that it puts together in there.
I mean, commercial real estate's a little different because you've got longer term lease transactions and rent rolls, and it absolutely changes in the capital markets, and cost of capital will directly affect real estate. So there's a lot more room for subjectivity, which creates a role for me.
What would you say, Michael, are the biggest misconceptions lawyer have about appraisal work?
I'd say a lot of them probably, well, naturally, they want you on their side. They want to give you a number if you'll let them. And honestly, for what they pay me, they would be paying me too much if they simply gave me a number and asked me to try to figure it out. I'm supposed to be a neutral player. I'm supposed to be coming up with the same number for an assignment, no matter who hires me. We're supposed to be calling balls and strikes, not asking the client what the answer is that they want. And for litigators, especially, that can be a little frustrating because they certainly don't want you helping the other side. And we have discussions in scoping out the assignment early to make sure that if their expectations are way off, that they know and they can come up with another solution. But we handle that pretty professionally, and that's always something that the other side will ask about: is are you a hired gun? And you're just here to help advocate for your client, and that's not it.
That's so interesting. Yeah, I hadn't thought of that before because, for law firms, these valuations, they often come up in those high stakes cases. So, like you said, it's important to understand in a legal context, you are that impartial umpire, right? So, in order to make that happen, how do you prepare? Right? Are you ensuring that you are kind of that neutral expert witness?
Many people could do this, particularly expert testimony before a trier of fact, like a jury or a judge.
Yeah.
A lot of them don't because there's a certain level of preparation that I think anybody with my MEI designation can handle, but you're also going up against somebody who's trying to trap you, who's trying to manipulate you, take you down a road where you might even contradict what your original testimony is because you get nervous, you get
Yeah.
rattled by something that they surprise you with. So you got to be prepared. I think typically my expectation is that if I come out of a deposition where the opposing counsel hasn't challenged my integrity, my experience, or my heritage, then I got off light.
So you're gonna have thick skin to be an expert witness, it sounds like as well.
Yeah, I mean, if we're an opinionated bunch, I'd say appraisers typically, but not so many are used to having their qualifications called into question. And that's the easiest way to win is to have your testimony thrown out as somebody who's not confident.
Well, then how do you make that valuation, that evidence really stand up in court? What's the tips and tricks there?
You have to be an effective communicator. So often what will happen is maybe an expert witness, and this is true for anybody, I'm sure, not just in real estate, but you wait until the question is completed, then answer. Also give the attorney you're working with a chance to object if it's in trial, or make a note for the record if it's in deposition. I think oftentimes my competitors will be eager to volunteer more information than was asked, and that's where they get in trouble. I learned something from a litigator a long time ago that I think was really helpful, which was tap your leg 3 times before you answer, and really just answer the question asked: yes, no, and sometimes I don't know is an okay answer. Certainly better than saying something that you didn't mean to and then later trips you up.
I've wished more people lived by that philosophy, tapping the leg 3 times before answering and just being less reactive, right? I think that's such a great piece of advice there, not just for the being an expert witness, but I think just in life in general. Is there any maybe, and we don't want to, share details or anything, but is there an example maybe of a case where valuation played a decisive role in that case?
Sure. So Most recently, I had a case here in Maryland where there was a right of way, and I don't want to get too deep into the weeds, but I'll just say, and it's all on the public record, a right of way case where typically a property owner can't claim any lost value from losing a portion of their property because of the nature of a public project. In this case, it was a sewer line extension. But what was unusual about the case was that it was an extension of underground right of way through a developer's private streets and subsurface rights. When I noticed that aspect of the fact pattern, the guy who was cross-examining me in the deposition was trying to throw my testimony out because the nature of Maryland statute basically would normally throw it out and just say you can't say, oh, my property would have been worth more, but because of this public project. But I questioned whether the statute actually applied in this case because it was going through a third party right of way, which the attorneys I was working with picked up on. And then by the time we went to trial, that was the entire hook on which their client prevailed was my testimony. And having taken a harder look at whether state law applied in this case, and the attorneys on the other side were a little frustrated by the fact that this went in front of the jury, and the jury was very much on the side of the client that I was working with, and we prevailed.
And that's why, a lot of times litigators or attorneys in general, try to stay away if possible from the jury because, that's the wild card and you don't know what's going to happen there. And that's where, it sounds like that's where that narrative really also can come in to support that evidence where it's not just based on facts, but sometimes those feelings need to come in as well.
Yep. And in this case, there was a judge who ruled on the admissibility of my testimony. And after he heard what I had to say, he was interested in hearing a little more, and that opened the door.
Love that. Cool. Well, thanks for sharing that, Michael.
You bet.
So we've talked about kind of, where we are, kind of how it plays a role. I want to look a little bit in a crystal ball here and look ahead at the future of appraisal and kind of the implications for law firms. Not often I have someone who has such a background who studied AI, blockchain, new technologies in valuation. How are all these shifts affecting law firms in the next decade?
I think in my interaction with clients, particularly attorneys, a key consideration is confidentiality. So one of the things that I think I would be very careful with when it comes to engaging third-party vendors like myself is how is the vendor accounted for confidentiality, particularly with regard to AI? We digest a lot of documents. So leases in particular can go on for hundreds of pages. And if you're looking at a 60-tenant office tower, that can seriously slow you down. A lot of my competitors have embraced AI technology if for no other reason than to condense, digest some of this material, look for patterns and so forth, which I think is a great application. Maybe uploading documents to ChatGPT is not such a great idea because I think the standard for confidentiality and how they're training their model isn't really established. I know attorneys are very sensitive to that dimension. So I would question your vendors to make sure they have an answer as to how they're handling confidentiality when it comes to documents.
That's such a great point. So I was at a conference probably a couple months ago, and we're talking about confidentiality and privacy and everything on AI. And there was a speaker, which like blew my mind. He is hired by companies like big Fortune 500 companies to basically dilute ChatGPT and AI with false information because their employees, it's because that's the only way to get rid of the information, right? Their employees are putting in confidential information, talking to ChatGPT, similar to what you mentioned with like attorneys and law firms, putting confidential information in ChatGPT, then can someone else theoretically, because it's training the model, can get that answer, right? So let's say you're Coca-Cola, you upload the secret recipe for Coca-Cola. How do you make sure no one gets it? You upload a whole bunch of other recipes with incorrect information, hoping that dilutes it. To your point, it's a reality, right? That's happening now, that companies are trying to make sure that the AI models aren't being trained on that information because they know their employees, whether, they admit to it or not, are using the AIs to upload this information. So it creates some interesting scenarios out there.
Yeah. So in our case, we use a vendor who essentially puts the digestion of documents on your local system.
Hmm.
So that information doesn't actually ever leave ours.
Yeah, and that's the right way to do it. So that way
Yeah,
it's not getting into where everyone else could potentially access information. So, can you talk a little bit more about the automated valuation models, the AVMs? I think that's so fascinating, of people relying on just doing something automated like that.
sure. So I mean, I'll point out that most appraisers will do work with lenders, and lenders, like everybody else, they're competing with each other, trying to get things done quicker, more cheaply for their borrowers, and so a lot of them do turn to this technology, particularly on the residential side. We don't actually do a lot of work with lenders as a result. Even on the commercial lending side, it does come up.
Yeah.
Um, what I will say is, if you are working with attorney clients, and they need to have somebody who can actually show up and be sworn if they're
Yeah.
giving testimony. And no jury or judge that I know of has yet accepted a computer as an expert witness.
No, and that's such a great point, right? Because you can also probably challenge the AI generated valuation, in a dispute there, if someone uses that, because we're kind of looking ahead a little bit here, Michael. And to your point, I can definitely see that becoming more and more mainstream, kind of using the AI valuation there. And so, human judgment, I think, can't be replaced, especially when it's something complex or has unique nuances, like the case that you mentioned earlier, right? I don't know if a computer would have found that.
Maybe, maybe not. I don't know that the judge would have been as sympathetic if there wasn't a living, breathing human being sitting next to him.
Yeah. Well, I'm ready to go into the checklist here, the 5 questions every law firm should ask about valuation. You ready to go through that, Michael?
Let's do it.
So this is your quick guide for lawyers working on cases with real estate at the center. We got 5 different items on the checklist. I'll start with number 1, and then you just jump in, Michael, here as the subject matter expert. And obviously, talking about experts, number 1, work with qualified experts. Right? You want to choose appraisers with deep experience and probably with the right credentials.
Yeah, I would say, I mean, we're a firm based in the Mid Atlantic. We've ventured further afield down to Atlanta or up to Boston as clients have needs. Honestly, we could probably appraise anything anywhere in the country as long as it has an income stream. I would encourage the selection of local practitioners in 2 cases. One would be if you're looking at land value, and the other, kind of contradicting what I said earlier, but if it's a dispute, in particular, if you're looking at residential valuation, I would stick with a local practitioner because they absolutely understand the nuances. And on residential, I would encourage you to look for something called a senior residential appraiser or an SRA designation. For commercial, definitely look for somebody with an MAI or member of the Appraisal Institute designation like I have.
That's really great information, Michael. Thank you. Let's move on to number 2, rely on defensible methodologies. So this is interesting. We talked about that a little bit there, kind of with valuation, because you want to make sure the valuation approach is appropriate for the property and case type, right?
Yep. So, you know, a lot of this is data driven, and sometimes the data just isn't there and you can't make things up. So, I would encourage your followers to keep 2 things in mind when thinking about methodology. Is the appraiser or valuation professional you're working with following what market participants themselves would do? Whether the information is there or not, there are people out there that will buy and sell properties based on limited information. So as long as it's emulating their approach to the market, you should be fine. Another consideration would be, what do local appraisal professionals consider the appropriate method? Um, and if it's consistent with what most people would do in my circles, then we should be fine.
So there's a lot of nuances there. And number 3, I think, is another one of those where you want to prioritize current, reliable data, right? Because nothing's worse than outdated or incomplete data that can really weaken your position and people can poke holes into, right?
As long as you can explain how you account for it. I mean, I think that's the key.
Mhm.
Do you have a credible explanation to how you approached it? I'll give you an example. A lot of people will say, if you're doing a retrospective value, say for a real estate property tax appeal, you shouldn't use any data that occurs after a date of value. I would say I'm probably in the minority on this, but I would say, like any other difference, you can adjust for it. My argument would be, for example, that a lot of what current values are based on, you can adjust for it back to a data value that's earlier, in the same way that somebody wanting to buy a shopping center would start with where were values, 2021, 2022, and you can adjust backward for that. I'm actually convinced some trier of facts that they should accept that approach.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, to your point, right? As long as you can explain it or kind of build a case for it, why is there no more up to date data or why is the data incomplete? Just be prepared for that. And, because this real quick sidebar, right? Because I teach here at the local university and my students have to do a presentation every week on a different platform, like let's say Facebook, and they got to talk about the demographics, and sometimes like in 2018 Facebook had these demographics. I'm like, great, but that's 7 years outdated. Why didn't you put any more updated stats there? And so that's something where you could have pulled something more up to date. But if you then come back and say, well, there's no more up to date stats, it's the last time they published
And
it, then that's a whole different conversation. It makes a lot of sense.
as long as you can explain it, the last thing you want is to go, oh, I never thought about that before.
Yeah. We want to be prepared, right? And that's number 4, prepare for cross-examination, because valuation must be explained clearly and withstand all that fun legal scrutiny.
Yeah, I would say you should know that if you're in a litigated matter, that the team for the other side is going to find any and all cases that you've ever participated in, especially ones where you might have contradicted yourself. So it's important to be consistent over your career and how you approach valuation. And God forbid you ever said, I would never use a cost approach in an appraisal, and then you end up doing it because they'll find it.
They'll find it. They'll scour those records and find what you said in the past. Yeah. Well, let's get to number 5. Last but not least, blend technology with human judgment. Use tools like AVMs for speed, but rely on expert analysis for accuracy.
Again, it just comes back to I think the market approach, which is what are buyers and sellers in the current market looking at. And frankly, we talked about Zillow. There may come a time when buyers and sellers have the equivalent of an AVM for commercial real estate, and some is more complicated than others. For example, an office condominium. Technically, it's commercial property, but in a lot of ways, there's enough data availability for that property type that an AVM might make sense. It may be that buyers and sellers turn to that technology themselves first. If that's true, then as a valuation professional, you should consider it.
Awesome. And it's just like, AI, I think, is a great tool. It's great for speed, but you can't just copy paste out of it and say, okay, that's the answer, right? Same thing is, it's great to use the tools, but you still need to have that critical thinking and have that human touch on it to be successful.
I mean, ultimately, where I help most of my clients the most is I'll get a phone call that may just be, hey, listen, do you have a minute? I'm seeing a value that's 10 times what I thought it was going to be, or 10% of what I thought. Does this make sense to you? And I can usually give them a quick answer based on whatever they can share me on the phone. Oftentimes that'll lead to an assignment.
There you go. So never say no to those calls.
Yeah.
Well, Michael, thank you so much for unpacking the evolving world of real estate valuation and its importance to the legal field. Before we wrap, can you share where listeners can connect with you, maybe learn more about Willowbrook Valuation Advisory Services, and tap into your expertise on appraisal and consulting?
Sure. So, we have a website, www.willowbrookvaluation.com. We often get inquiries on Google Maps, if you can believe it, where
Wow,
people
okay.
would find us. They're looking for geographic competence. They look in the DC, Baltimore area. We're pretty good about satisfied clients getting us testimonials, and that's a good way to see what kind of results that we've given our clients so far.
That's music to my ears, right? As a marketer and a local marketer, is, Google Maps are so important, and you guys are doing it right. Yeah, getting those testimonials, getting those reviews, and using that, that word of mouth to continue to propel more leads for you guys. That's awesome, Michael.
Yeah, let us know how we can help.
Reach out to Michael. And for our listeners, if you want your law firm to stop guessing and start growing smarter, whether it's through Google Maps or social media or something else, book your free discovery session through our Motion for Marketing system. The link is in the show notes. And if you enjoyed today's episode as much as I did, share it with a colleague and leave us a review. It helps more firms learn the strategies that actually work. Until next time, evaluate wisely, pour yourself something crisp, and keep building a practice you love. Cheers. Thank you so much, everyone.